Donald Trump has always been a conspiracy theorist. He jump-started his political career by pushing the racist birther conspiracy about then-President Barack Obama. And once he was in the White House, Donald Trump continued to push conspiracies, big and small. Only this time, he was positioned as the most powerful person in the world. While Trump was in office, a growing online conspiracy took hold of many of his supporters. That conspiracy theory, known as QAnon, is built around an anonymous account, Q, that posts vague language on far-right message boards, which is then interpreted by its followers. The account claims to be documenting a shadow war between Donald Trump and the Satanist pedophile cabal of Democrats and elites that have been secretly running the government for decades. As the conspiracy grew in popularity, so did Trump's winks and nods to the movement. When asked, he refused to separate himself from the conspiracy.
At the crux of the theory is this belief that you are secretly saving the world from this satanic cult of pedophiles and cannibals. Does that sound like something you are behind?
Well, I haven't heard that, but is that supposed to be a bad thing or a good thing? I mean, you know, if I can help save the world from problems, I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to put myself out there.
Oh, I do not miss those pressers. By 2020, the web of conspiracies of lies became difficult to discern who was feeding who. Trump pulled from QAnon-affiliated conspiracies inspired by his own big lie that there was extensive fraud in the 2020 election. This ultimately ended with real-world consequences on January 6th. And shortly after, Donald Trump was banned from a number of social media platforms, including his favorite, Twitter. Since then, Trump's move to his own social media platform, Truth Social, seems to only be feeding his penchant for conspiracies. This week, in an alarming post, Donald Trump claimed that almost 2 years after the 2020 election, he should be declared as the rightful winner now, or that a new election should be held. The next day, he shared a barrage of QAnon content and other conspiracy theories, including reposting a 2017 Q message that was critical of the intelligence community. The flurry of posts are the latest indicator that Trump is not winking and nodding at the Q doctrine anymore. He's outright promoting it. Joining me now is NBC News senior reporter Ben Collins. Ben, always a pleasure to have you here. Clearly not this topical material, though. I guess we could do without, right? I mean, Trump has always been one to jump on conspiracies. His Truth Social platform, it seems like he's starting to kind of box himself in with almost exclusively right-wing talking points, memes, and other conspiracies. But I want to know from you, this new flurry of activity that we're detecting from him on this Truth Social platform, how different is it than his past activity that he was doing on other social media platforms?
Well, they are overt calls to QAnon people now. That's not something that he used to do. He used to toe the line. People around him as well, people like Dan Scavino, used to toe the line. Nobody ever openly mentioned the storm or, posted about Q drops or anything like that because they knew it wasn't true, obviously. They knew Donald Trump is not saving the world from people eating babies. That is not a thing that he was doing or is doing. But the problem is he needs his base to reignite recently. QAnon as a concept was dying. I want to make that very clear. It was, those forums were losing people day by day. Those people were still in the far right internet, but their belief that Donald Trump was saving the world from pedophiles was like withering away. So QAnon forums were dying in that space, but now it's reignited. I went to their forums last night during Joe Biden's speech, and they were just back at it, back with the whole thing. And, their top post last night during the speech was, I'm not interested in hearing about democracy from somebody who stole the 2020 election. So that's the kind of thing that you're dealing with, is a group obsessed with the big lie, assuming that Donald Trump is going to be president again any day now.
So, Ben, Fox News upset this week at your comments that Trumpism should be covered as a violent fairy tale of revenge. You replied to their story saying, I sure did. So, Ben, my question, do you think the fairy tale of revenge that's now Trumpism, is it directly tied to the main tenets of QAnon? Are they just symbiotic? Are these concepts together? And is it really kind of this far outlier theory of QAnon, or now because that's really his base, it's become more mainstreamed?
Yeah, all of these movements are like, it's sort of like how a circle is not always an oval. You can pull from the militia movements, you can pull from sovereign citizenry, you can pull from QAnon, but the main goal at the end of the day is to make it so everyone knows that there's a deep state running the government, and what you think that deep state is doing differs by what you believe in. The QAnon people believe that they are covering for a global pedophile ring. The militia people just think they exist to tax you and take all your money and make you a slave to the state. There are various different reasons to believe in that deep state, but the destruction of it is the point, and that's the broad-based narrative now within Trumpism. Is he's the only guy who can take down that administrative state, and now these people are pretty certain you can't do that by voting. They might vote anyway, but they are pretty certain that the only way to do that is through violence or intimidation. So you can see that at local school boards, where they intimidate local school boards into getting their way with that. But also you see people, losing the thread. You see people going to FBI field offices and shooting into them as well. So it has many different end games for these people, but democracy is not one of them.
Ben, your dystopian beat's tough. It's also not clear that this conspiracy theory fever is getting any better. You mentioned a couple of minutes ago that it was withering on the vine, right? It wasn't being fed. It wasn't being watered. So it was kind of dying out. How do you actually make it stop? Is it possible to actually make it stop?
It's really hard to put the worms back in the can here. It's very difficult to do it. But the number one thing you have to do is you can vote out anybody who is pushing this violent rhetoric and these lies all the time that, democracy can fix itself with this sort of thing. The issue is the pipes sort of favor the loudest material. They favor the scariest material. So, for example, Donald Trump is on Truth Social now. He is not on Twitter. He's not on Facebook. He's banned from Facebook until at least 2023. But his posts still end up in those spaces because his whole end game now is to say something so inflammatory that news people screenshot those things, talk about them on air, talk about them on the radio, and discuss them all day long. So there is this perverse incentive now for him to say the craziest thing. Same thing goes for Marjorie Taylor Greene and the far right parts of the party. The loudest people get the biggest megaphone right now. That is unfortunately a function of how the internet works, but it's also a function of how our politics work now. So if we can rearrange first of all, how we view the media, how we view media as people, but also how our politics work, that's the larger heuristic solution here.
Ben, you offer up a very serious challenge, right? Because that is the quandary. How do you report? How do you talk about these things without actually feeding the monster? NBC's Ben Collins, thank you for being here. We appreciate it.